3.5, 4 years ago, I was thinking the same thing. I can't believe people are doing this. And then I started seeing all the fines, all the regulations happening. And then even talking to my aunt recently, she was like, yeah, if a website doesn't let me turn off cookies, like I don't go to that. I support different sites.
Marketing is about values.
Nike didn't call me and sell me this in a catalog. I bought this swoosh because it's ingrained in my soul.
When you have a product that really resonates with customers, the word of mouth grows like wildfire.
Welcome to the Marketing Max Show. Now, let's dive in.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Max Show. I am joined by not Logan today, not my normal co-host, but Chart, or Richard, but he goes by Chart for short, from Captain Compliance. Super excited to have him on the show. And the reason why he's here instead of Logan is because I was speaking to a friend that works pretty high up at a company here in California that spends a lot of money on ads and buying traffic from all sorts of different places, Facebook, Google, a lot of third-party ad networks, performance networks, the whole nine yards, all over the world. And he was telling me that they just ran into this really complicated compliance issue that they're facing, particularly in Europe, with IAB. And I'd never heard of IAB before. And when I started Googling it, I learned that there's something kind of similar here in California, if you're running ads in California. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I really have no idea what's going on these days in compliance. I don't even have like a cookie consent banner on my website on marketingmax.com. Let me go find someone who is an absolute expert in this, who can school me on what I need to be doing and hopefully gather or garner some insights for you guys, the listeners, to know what should we be doing to make sure that we don't get sued or we don't have any sort of penalties or anything else. So with that insanely long introduction, Chart, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Great to be here today.
So I guess we'll just start there because I did a quick Google and my friend introduced me to this thing called IAB. Like, what is IAB and what do I need to know if I'm running ads in Europe about it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's the Interactive Advertising Bureau, and pretty much any big ad networks, anybody who's doing like CTV ads, is really a part of the IAB. And it's kind of like the standards and association for those that want to run advertising, not just in Europe, but really globally. And they really have a good mission where they want to lead and represent and promote industry collaboration. So there's different standards that different companies can go by. So it's a mix mash of all different companies doing different things. And then it just creates obviously huge litigation risk, but also just it's not good hygiene overall. So the IAB has been around for years, and they have something called the Transparency and Consent Framework, which is also helpful for cookie consent banners, which is something that you've run into, and we're seeing more and more where advertisers are being stifled, where they're not allowed to retarget or they can't run specific advertising campaigns if they don't have an approved consent banner. And that's one of the things and tools that Captain Compliance has developed and built because we saw that there were so many issues that advertisers and people that I used to work with when I owned an ad agency. And they said, man, if there was really just a great solution out there, we would love to have this. And lo and behold, going back about 3.5 years ago, when I first started learning more about the privacy industry, here in the US, there was only one state privacy law, and that was in California, called the California Consumer Privacy Act. If we fast forward to today, now we have 20 state frameworks, and there are just recently announced that Massachusetts and New York are also looking to do new privacy laws. And actually next month, Tennessee will be the next state that comes out with its privacy law. So it's growing super fast. There's so much complexities in these laws, and the litigation, which we can get to today, is a whole nother risk beyond just being able to target. Is just something else that's exploding. And we're seeing, even last week, we got a call about being helpful as an expert witness because somebody was being sued. And they had a banner, but it wasn't configured correctly. And we just saw Honda in California, actually right by you, actually just got fined $632,000 for having an improperly set up banner. So there's so much different litigation from so many different sort of laws beyond just the state privacy frameworks, but they're also finding these old, in the case of the one call last week, was a 1967 law that says the California Invasion of Privacy Act that says if you're wiretapping or you're spying on somebody without their permission, then you as an individual can go out and sue the company or individual that's spying on you. And that's something that's really been exploding.
Wow. Okay. So I have so many questions here. I'm really glad you're on the show personally, so I can just learn how to defend myself. But I guess like a very, very, very basic question. It could just be because I'm an idiot, as I've said many times on the show. But when it comes to, like, I know CCPA was a big deal a couple of years ago when it first came out, right? Like in California, you have to 100% get people's permission in order to retarget them, track them in any way, shape, or form. But now you're saying there's 20 something states that have some version of CCPA, right? Does that mean that if I live, like you said, it's going to happen in New York. If I live in New York and I'm running ads in the rest of the country, just because I live in New York, I have to have it because my website is kind of like owned by a company in New York? Or does this mean that I could be living on Mars, but if I'm running ads in New York, I need a specific consent banner that looks at maybe the IP address, identifies this person's in New York, and then like kind of assigns the right privacy policy checkbox or whatever you want to call it? Like, is that how it works, or is it the first way?
Yeah, and you sound just like a lot of the clients that we speak to on a daily basis. So if you take the Dragon up to Mars and you and Elon are saying, hey, we're going to start a website up here in Mars, even though you're on Mars, it depends where the business is targeting users. So if you're allowing traffic and visitors from California, you're still liable to the California laws because you as a California resident are what's called data subject. And as a marketer, you're seeing all these different people putting ADA compliance on their websites.
Yeah.
Well, the amount of people that have a disability going to your website is such a small fraction compared to the amount of data subjects, because every individual that goes to your site is a data subject. And or these very industrious lawyers, as we call them, figure out that we can sue over these different privacy laws. It's just going to keep growing until everybody has properly set up consent banners and so forth. And right now, 75% of the web, at the very least, is not even privacy compliant. And then I bet if you actually dug in really deep, I would guess that probably 90 to 95% of actual websites, even if they have some sort of privacy hygiene set up, is still not fully compliant, just because it's so complex and there's so many moving parts, and it's really hard for most businesses to follow because it's not a priority. And I'll give you one quick story. There was a telehealth company, and they were about to sign up with us. They were taking their time, and they had us on a list of a handful of other compliance measures. And then one day they asked me, hey, do you protect against Metapixel litigation, which is Facebook's Metapixel for retargeting ads?
Yeah.
I said, we do, but you've never asked about this specifically, but we did explain this to your team, what's going on. And they said, well, it might be too late, but we just got hit with a $5 million class action lawsuit for a different privacy law that's not even one of those 20 state privacy laws that I mentioned. And because of that, they signed up the very next day, and while they're protected against future litigation, they're still having to deal with the current litigation lawsuit, all because they didn't install our privacy software before.
Okay, this is insane. $5 million. You mentioned 600,000 before to Honda.
Yep, and that was an East Coast business in a state without a privacy law being targeted by a federal law. So there's all the. Pretty much the bottom line is you need to do something if you're running any sort of targeting, tracking. And in the EU, they have the model where you have to opt in as a data subject to be tracked and followed. But in the US, you have to just give the option or the ability for the user to opt out. So they're different models here. Now, will that change in time? There's a lot of lobbyists fighting on both sides. So it remains to be seen. But the bottom line is it's complex.
So the company in an East Coast state that you mentioned doesn't have a law in place in their state, but they were hit with the federal thing, $5 million class action lawsuit. How big is that company? Like, what are they doing ballpark revenue wise? The company I mentioned earlier that had the IAB, I think they're doing, $100 million plus in revenue. You mentioned Honda, like this other company. How big or small are they?
Yeah, I think optically they look really big. They have 400 plus physicians. So I think that's part of it. And the company that was targeting them also sued some very major healthcare companies, some venture backed. One of them essentially helped put them into bankruptcy. So it's incredible the kind of damage that can be done for, and our pitch to people is like, look, we're just trying to protect you. We do all the work, and it's a small, tiny line item that protects you and potentially saves the company. And unfortunately, we've seen a couple that took their time and now is paying the price because they didn't put a priority on it.
Yeah, so I guess this is my point, or not my point, but this is my main question here. A lot of the people that listen to this show are startup founders. They're a small company. They might be doing less than $1 million in revenue. Maybe they're doing less than 10 million in revenue. They have 5 or 10 employees. They could be spending lots of money on Facebook ads, and they're an e-commerce brand, or they're a client of my agency that we're running Facebook ads to sign up newsletters, subscribers for them. But like, if I'm a small team, right? If I'm doing less than $1 million in revenue and I'm getting, I don't know, 10,000 people a month to my website, I'm probably not thinking of this as a priority or thinking about this as something I want to spend money on, because I'm like, they're probably going after the bigger guys, or that wouldn't happen to me. Like they wouldn't come after me. Is that the right way of thinking about it? Like, I'm genuinely asking for myself because I don't have it on my own. I don't even know what Captain Compliance costs, but like if I'm a small startup,
if I was a small startup, I would be thinking that same way too if I didn't know any better. And I will say, from the state privacy frameworks, you are correct. Most of the enforcement actions have been against bigger players. Sephora had a $1.2 million fine from California. There was a $632,000 fine to Honda recently, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. But then there's these private right of action lawsuits that are happening. And that's from everything from the California Invasion of Privacy Act I mentioned. There's also another one from the 1980s called the VPPA, which is the Video Privacy Protection Act. See, just another, never even heard of it.
You're the pro. That's why you're on.
Yeah. And look, I didn't know about it until not that long ago either, until I started hearing from clients saying, hey, we got hit with this VPPA lawsuit. Can you help us with this? And essentially what that is, it's a 1980s law about video rental history, where a federal judge didn't want his rental history leaked, and so wanted to protect it. And now these very industrious law firms, like I mentioned, are using the VPPA to go out and sue anybody. So if you're running a video on your website, whether it's from YouTube, Vimeo, or anywhere else, it's actually ingesting data and saying, all right, Max out in LA is looking at this video at this IP address, and they're able to identify you. Well, all of a sudden they're taking your identifiable information. They're not getting your consent, and then knowing that you've watched this video. So they're using that as a VPPA violation. So what's happening is, they're either filing lawsuits, or there's one firm that's doing a really incredible job. When you think in volume, they're filing thousands of these arbitration claims. So they're not even hitting the Pacer and the other sort of sites, but they're filing arbitration claims. And what's happening is they're saying, we're taking you to arbitration. You have Metapixel, or you have Hotjar tracking technology on your website. You didn't gain permission from our plaintiff, and it's a serial plaintiff that they're using. And then
I'll ask that question. Sorry.
Yeah. And they're using that serial plaintiff, and they're saying, all right, come, we're asking for $30,000. And while not a huge amount of money, maybe to a smaller startup, but they're asking for that as kind of a starting point. And then if the business wants to fight it, they have to hire an attorney, they have to pay the arbitration claim. And then if they lose, because they are technically guilty of and violating, then they have to pay what could be an even greater fine, depending on how the arbitration goes.
First of all, that's so scary. Damn. I mean, I've run ads for hundreds of people, and I don't think anyone has had a pop-up on their site the moment you click a Facebook ad saying, hey, like, please give us consent to track you. Like, that kills conversion. I think that's why a lot of people don't use it. But when you say a serial plaintiff, what does that mean? That means like they just found some Joe Schmo to just basically say, yeah, I'm going to be the person to sue all these people, and they get a percent of it. And like, that's what it is. Just one person doing that.
Yeah, yes. And I think the irony that I've been told from another AM Law 200 law firm that defends a lot of these claims said, ironically, that they're finding these people from running Facebook ads saying, have you been a victim of retargeting?
That's hilarious. I mean, you probably just need to find 1 or 2 people, and you could have that one person sue 50 million companies. So why even run the Facebook ads, I guess?
So, and I don't know how many different plaintiffs they're cycling through, but it is kind of ironic of how they're finding the plaintiffs. And then there's also talk in California about amending, and they're trying to fix it so these Invasion of Privacy Act claims won't come about. But then the issue is the CCPA has, if there is a data breach, then they allow a private right of action. And for those listening who don't know, a private right of action essentially means you or I as an individual can then go and sue a company, whereas right now it's up to the California Privacy Protection Authority to actually go ahead and enforce. But these would make it where any individual can sue. And what they're saying is, if you have Facebook, again, which most people have, retargeting people, they're considering that exfiltration of data. And that exfiltration, they're saying, according to Shaw versus Capital One, right, big company Capital One, is proving that this is a data breach and therefore allows for right of action. So
Wow.
It's just going to be a whack-a-mole game. Cat and mouse. As one thing goes away, another one will pop up. So this is pretty much here to stay.
Wow. I have so many other questions, but I guess is like the easiest way to explain the protection or the insurance, like just to make sure that they don't come after me, having a pop-up on the site. Like, is there any way to do it without a pop-up? I think you kind of need a pop-up, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, it can live on the footer. At some point, we can show you what we have. A little cookie guy, half-bitten cookie guy, who is an icon, and you can click to pop it on and off if you want to go ahead and adjust the settings. The other parts that we've figured out to really automate and keep companies compliant are, we have software that'll scan a website and then it'll automatically update all the third-party and first-party tracking tech and regular tech that's on a website. So that way, any business owner or marketer who adds TikTok or adds a LinkedIn pixel for a campaign doesn't have to then add and update the cookie table. It's automatically done. The other thing that a lot of litigation is happening is privacy policies and privacy notices that have incorrect information. So if you're giving a false sense of hope, or you're saying, hey, this privacy policy says this website has 0 tracking technologies, but as soon as we add it, we will let you know, which is a lot of sites, believe it or not, will have that in their privacy policy. And I told a pretty decent sized law firm that's now a client of ours, I said, it says this here, but have you ever updated this and told people when you add tech? And they said, oh no, we don't know. We just copy and pasted this. And I said, well, we should fix that. So we actually have a privacy notice software that both updates dynamically as new laws come out and also generates a policy based on actual data handling practices and is layered. So pretty much checks the box with all the different privacy requirements from the laws.
So I asked you to come on because I personally wanted to know more about this. Like, you're the expert. You run Captain Compliance. You're the captain. Maybe not. I don't know if you said that in your marketing, but like, you're the captain. How do I become, if you're Batman, how do I become Robin? Like, how do I stay up to date with all of these New York and Tennessee and everything? Like, where do you learn all of this stuff from?
Yeah, and we say it's so complicated that any one person can barely comprehend and take everything in. So there is an association called the International Association of Privacy Professionals, just like we talked about IAB, right? More organizations. They have meetups every couple months in local chapters. So there's like an LA chapter. We go and I speak with other attorneys and other members. There's also a daily newsletter Monday to Friday where we get updates on what's happening. And then I come from a digital marketing and SEO background. So actually I am creating content all the time about different rulings, different laws, different things that are happening in the industry. And that's obviously a tie-in with the marketing play, right? Because like sharing your knowledge is really important. And now like we're seeing in our traffic, not only do we get a lot of traffic from Google, but we're also seeing ChatGPT, Perplexity, and these other LLMs are picking up all the knowledge that we're creating. And then we even made our own GPT within OpenAI, all about privacy compliance and advice and tips for the general users. But there's a lot of information. There's, like I said, 20 state privacy laws. Then there's different federal laws from the past. Then there's different countries that have different laws. And then there's nuances even within those countries. So like in Canada, there's one called PAPEDA, which is their national law. But then in Quebec, they have something called Quebec Law 25, which is another nuance of that privacy law.
Gosh.
Yeah, it gets crazy. And then like as a marketer, you're like, wait, I got to run ads and they're blocking me. Why can't I retarget? And it's like, oh, because you don't have the IAB TCF, or you don't in Colorado, like where there's privacy law. Oh, they're not going to let us retarget for these certain demographics unless we have an approved consent management platform up. So it's just getting more and more complicated by the week. But the IAPP organization is usually like the starting point, and that's where I pretty much started at, learning and going to conferences and meetups and just really sinking my teeth in. And it's an always evolving space that's really just incredible how much it's grown in a short period of time.
As my lawyer says, lawyers' wives need jewelry too. You keep talking about all these acts, and it's like that's their job to learn all these different things and know where the loopholes are and know who to sue and how to scale it up to sue thousands of people a week or whatever you mentioned before, $30,000 arbitration claims. And yeah, lawyers need to make a living too. This is kind of crazy. I guess one like more minutia question though, just while we're on it, when you say like you can't retarget unless you get permission in Quebec and some of these other things. If you have the Facebook pixel installed on your website, but you're not actually running retargeting ads and you can prove it, are you a little bit more safe, or is it literally just like having the pixel and collecting that data in the first place? You run a really high risk if you're not actually set up compliant properly.
Sure. So the claim is that you're collecting that data from Facebook, and then you are processing that data back to Facebook and giving them your information without their permission. So
Yeah.
Problematic, yes, even if you're not running ads.
So just like having things on your, like having any sort of tracking pics on your website without any sort of like checkbox to confirm I agree with this is sketchy. You open yourself up to liability, as my lawyer would say.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Open up to liability. And I would say it's not if, it's just when eventually, as more of these industrious law firms figure out, oh, we can do this, and everybody who doesn't have this, especially if 25% of all websites are still not compliant. I mean, that's hundreds of millions probably of websites out there that are all potential targets.
Yeah, and it doesn't even matter like the company's revenue, or it doesn't matter the traffic. Of course, if you do go to court, they could make an argument, oh, like there's more people that have been damaged by this, but it's really just like if your website doesn't have this, you've been collecting anyone's data on behalf of this. So
exactly. Yeah, and have you noticed like Google Analytics updated in the last few years, right?
GA4.
That's all because of privacy, right? Like these things that at least I, from the background, didn't think about initially. And I'm like, wow, why is Google Analytics changing? Oh, because of privacy issues. They were even saying Google Fonts, like you can't have certain fonts because it takes in your data. Like there's so many nuances and crazy like things popping up.
Wow, I didn't know the fonts thing. I know GA4 changed solely because of privacy. They were collecting too much data and they were getting into trouble, regulatory trouble, whatever. But like, what's the easiest way to get started protecting myself? Obviously, you're going to pitch me Captain Compliance, which is fine. I don't know what the cost is or how easy it is. So walk us through that. But like, what are other things that we could do, to make sure we're protected? Or is the answer just like sign up with you guys?
Yeah, no, definitely. And we are actually launching a tool soon. We're trying to figure out who we're going to allow access to, because a lot of insurance companies, a lot of their cyber insureds are getting sued and then they're filing claims. So we have a tool that we've been building that will actually scan a website that has consent banners but doesn't have it actually properly configured, and then shows, wow, hey, I've scrolled through this website, I turned off all cookies, but it still ended up following and retargeting me. That's a big issue, right?
Sure.
Consumer Reports released something a couple months ago saying, hey, we did all this research, we found that half of these sites are not actually respecting users' privacy and their preferences, and then that got everybody up in arms, and then the Honda fine. But yeah, I mean, the very basic, if you wanted just the cookie consent banner on a self-service model, starts at only $40, and then we have other tools that all tie in together for like full-on compliance. So we're targeting a lot of the SME and SMB space and just helping and automating their compliance. But we have a free scanner where you can go on to app.captaincompliance.com and you can register, and then you can scan any website, and then you can see all the different cookies that you have in tracking technology. And it'll showcase first-party cookies on there, as well as third-party cookies, and then it'll also showcase which ones are retargeting, which ones are performance or analytics based, which ones are strictly necessary to actually make the website function, and then it has a description of what each of those Technologies does on the site. So that's usually kind of the starting point that we tell everybody. It's first getting a database and kind of a counting of what's on the website, what's happening. And then from there, you can determine, okay, we don't have any tracking technology on there, then we're fine, right? If you do, then you don't have a banner and you don't have it disclosed in your privacy notice, then you'll want to go to our privacy notice generator, create a privacy notice based on all your data handling practices, and then do all that. And then we're here. We like to say we are your privacy superhero team, so we're glad to help. I'm just one of the many captains here to help people when they have privacy questions.
To bring this conversation full circle, at the beginning we were talking about you could be on Mars but running ads in New York or California. You need to be compliant when people pull up your website in those states. For that $40 a month, does that include that level of technology or IP tracking or whatever, or would you need to go higher?
Yeah, so
literally asking for myself.
Yeah, so the full suite. So the banner's 40, and then we have other tools. We have the automatically scanning and updating the cookie table. We call that a cookie transparency page, kind of like a trust center. We also have the adaptive privacy notice that keeps your privacy notice up to date. So if there's new privacy laws that are coming out, aka Tennessee on July 1st is coming out. So we would push updates to everybody's privacy notice. So then also you have a Tennessee supplement. You don't have to worry about new regulators or new lawsuits coming just because a new law came out. So we keep up to date with that. And then we have something called a data subject access request. So as a California resident, you actually have the rights. If you go to almost any major website or retailer that you bought from, you should be able to go to them and say, I have purchased from you. I would like to know what information you have about me. If they don't reply back within 45 days, you can actually lodge a complaint and they'll get fined $7,500 per person that complains. And
Wow.
There's a big retailer called Todd Snyder, owned by American Eagle Outfitters, and they were actually recently fined for not following and making things too difficult. Like if somebody wanted to know, hey, what did I buy? They're like, all right, we need your photo ID. We need proof it was you and this. And it's like, do we really need to give Max a hard time because he bought a really cool hat from us? We should just give him that information. But instead, they made it really difficult. And that was one of the things the regulators didn't like. So for a small amount, our full package, if it's bundled together, we do it for $449, starting at $449 a month for SMBs and SMEs, and then it goes up depending on site traffic and other kind of needs and amount of websites.
I'll hit you with a closing story and then a question. I was texting with my friend a couple weeks ago. He runs a marketing agency, and he was saying, I want to get into the insurance business. I want to start an insurance company. And I said, dude, I've always thought about it. It's a great business to be in. Super highly regulated, though, hard to get into, need a lot of money for premiums and meeting all these criteria. But I said, but there's a huge opportunity because I think most marketing agencies, and in particular, most just small businesses, they don't even have basic insurance for their company, what's called E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance, which is like if someone on your team accidentally types in spending $1,000 a day on your Facebook ads campaign, and they should have typed in 100, the client comes back and sues you for that money, like errors and omissions insurance. It happens. A lot of companies don't have that kind of insurance. I said, do you have that insurance? And he said, no, we don't make mistakes. Like that would never happen to me. And I said, first of all, you're an idiot. Second of all, what I know I kind of touched on this before, but what is your answer? What is the pitch for someone that's like, we're too small. These companies aren't going to, these industrial law firms, these privacy acts, they're not going to come our way. What is the answer there? What's that pitch to really kind of hammer home that like people need to do this? Honestly, to get me to go on your website and sign up for $40 a month, because I'm still on the fence, because I'm like, I don't know. There's only a couple thousand people that visit my website every month.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's just a matter of time till they come across and they find your website, right? And there's some litigator out there who says, okay, just almost free money, right? We'll send out the arbitration demand. We'll send the claim. They have the tech on there. So to spend a few dollars a month to save money. We were speaking with a very big kind of in the adult industry, and the third lead counsel said, I'd rather save $1 million and not have to pay it out and protect than and versus having to spend it. So it's everybody's different in their risk aversion. Look, not everybody's going to be compliant. We had one big lawyer from a public company, and they said they paid a few $100,000 in fines, and they just paid along the way. And they said, we're making so much money from the retargeting advertising that it's okay. We prefer to pay. And some feel that way. Facebook's a great example. I mean, they paid billions of dollars in privacy fines, but they just keep going because they're generating that kind of revenue over and over again. So
when you're a $1 trillion company, you have those luxuries.
You have those luxuries, yeah. So for the smaller ones, it's all about just risk aversion. If they're okay knowing that they will eventually be targeted, and they do that, but also think about the trust you build when you have a business and you show that we respect your privacy, we respect your rights. Look at Apple, right? Speaking of $1 trillion companies, here's a company that's based almost all their marketing around like being a privacy-centric company that respects your privacy in the utmost way, and they've really used that as a competitive advantage. So businesses can also think, if we're a company showcasing that we respect users' privacy versus the next company they visit, who do you think they're going to go with? So some understand that, and it is good to have proper privacy hygiene and respect what users want. If somebody doesn't want to be in your newsletter or they don't want to be retargeted, then it's good to respect that.
I like that term, privacy hygiene. I think that's a cool term. Do you have time for one more like personal question? I'm just curious about.
Yes,
since this is for me anyways. So like when you log into a website and there's a privacy policy or privacy pop-up or cookie pop-up consent banner that pops up, it says like accept and reject, right? Or like allow and deny. If you click deny, I've never understood how this actually works. Does that signal to Facebook like don't collect this data? Like how does that work?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, actually, because that's an issue that we're seeing. And in fact, one of these like cheaper Shopify plugins even came out recently and said, we actually don't even do cookie blocking. So I'm like, so it's just a notification, but it actually doesn't respect the user's privacy. So I thought when I was first diving into this that it was simple and easy. I mean, it took us over a year to really build and get the product done correctly. But we take pride in being probably one of only maybe 4 or 5 companies that really have it dialed in and done correctly. And what happens is if you set up through Google Tag Manager, or really any tag manager for that example, is you can set different triggers and different levels of which tags fire in which order, and then do the actual blocking. And if you click that you want to block all targeting, then technically that should then block all the Facebook pixels and everything else from retargeting and firing. So to do it right, you really have to go through a tag manager. We can install through Google, JavaScript code. It just doesn't work as efficiently. So if you want the highest level of compliance, which is eventually going to be demanded and required everywhere, would be through a tag manager, and that's the best way to do it.
Wow. And your software integrates with GTM?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. So we always prefer and suggest to do it. I will say probably about half the clients we deal with have no idea what Google Tag Manager is. I will say half usually have no idea really about privacy compliance. They just know they either need to be compliant or they recently got hit with some form of legal letter or notice. And that's why they've come to us and said, all right, now I'm ready to be compliant. What do I do?
Wow. I was always curious because I was like, I bet there's a million companies out there that are just creating the cookie pop-up, but like integrating with the Facebook pixel, and like there's a lot. Like if you're running ads and if you're running a legit marketing organization, like you said, there's Hotjar, there's heat mapping tools, there's rb2b.com, one of my favorite new tools that like identifies the actual human visiting the page. Like how is that compliant? I don't know, but they say it is in the US.
I actually have a picture of Adam Robinson. We were at a marketing conference together 2 months ago, and I came up to him and I said, "Can I get a picture with you?" And I was like, "Do people ask you for photos?" And he said, "You know what?" He said, "Not really, no." And then he gave a speech 2 days later, and he said, "It's good to be a celebrity in your industry. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you know that I've become a little mini celebrity here. But if I walk on the street, people don't know who I am." He said, "Actually, some guy came up to me at the conference and wanted a picture with me and asked." I'm like waving, "Hey, Adam, good to see you." Like, yeah, like let's get our software on all your RB2B clients would be great, because that's really a perfect match for us. Anybody who's running that should have our notice and the privacy notice and the consent banner.
Yeah, it's really funny you bring that up because last week, for the third time in my life, someone at a random coffee shop, Alfred Coffee, walked up to me and said, "Are you Marketing Max?" I had no idea who they are. He says, "I followed you on Twitter and TikTok for a long time." I said, "Okay, this is maybe I don't want to post anymore. This is a little weird. I'm not like the guy that wants to walk down the street and have everyone know me." But where if people want to maybe not become your level of proficiency on this stuff, but want to learn more about all of these compliant challenges, how to stay compliant, and maybe sign up for your $40 a month package and all the other tools that you guys have, where can they go to learn more and make sure that they lower their exposure and lower their liability
Yeah, absolutely.
these lawsuits?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to captaincompliance.com. You can even register for a free initial account on there. We're glad we also do free privacy audits if they want to check out and see what their gaps and potential risks are. And then you're welcome to follow us on LinkedIn as well. And then we have an education section on the Captain Compliance site where every week we're putting out multiple blogs and education pieces about different things happening in the privacy world, whether it's new AI regulations and compliance, whether it's new fines that have happened, new laws that have passed, and so forth. So it's really just a plethora of information that we're always putting out.
Wow. Okay. CaptainCompliance.com. I'm going to go check out that $40 a month option because that seems like a good equilibrium point for me to make sure that I'm protected against $30,000 lawsuits and all the above, since not that many people visit marketingmax.com. But I should probably recommend this to all my clients too, because I have clients that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on Facebook that have no pop-up at all.
It's extremely pragmatic, and like we said, it's good privacy hygiene, builds trust. There's a lot of reasons to do it. 3.5-4 years ago, I was thinking the same thing. I can't believe people are doing this, and then I started seeing all the fines, all the regulations happening, and then even talking to my aunt recently, she was like, "Yeah, if a website doesn't let me turn off cookies, like I don't go to that. I support different sites." I said, "Okay, this is happening more and more."
It always starts with the aunts and the grandparents, and then it moves its way down to the normal, or not normal, but the tech savvy people in terms of trust and everything else. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll check out Captain Compliance right now.
Thank you. This
You
is
guys
great.
next time.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Max show. It takes me and my team hours to produce it every single week, but it only takes you 15 seconds to hit that share button and text it to a friend, drop it in a Slack group, or share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any of your favorite social platforms. I appreciate you taking the time to check out my content. Have an awesome day.